last time I'll say this on this panel or ever, but I completely agree with everything that you have just said. It is narcissism. I lived through the first tranche of identity politics in the proper women's liberation movement, which I joined in 1979. The 80s were dogged with it. It was terrible. This is now complete second wave identity politics, but with one key difference. It's not political. There are no politics involved at all. And I think that we can see which groups are given more credence than others, and it is absolutely without any question whatsoever the men's rights activists who speak through the prism of transgenderism, who will say and be patted on the back for saying it, speaking as a trans woman of colour, when in fact they're just a white man with a beard, and can shut up, and this has recently happened when the trans activist Paris Lees, who was raised male, who is white, told Nimco Ali, who is a campaigner against female genital mutilation, who is black, who is from Somalia. She was told that she was practicing white, capital W, feminism, capital F. So if a white man can tell a black woman that they have the absolute authority, the moral, ethical, political authority on something, the world has gone fucking crazy.
Right, there we go. She doesn't disappoint, does she? Right, okay. Why has feminism, particularly in your view, got into this?
Right.
Because it drives me mad that it's feminism that's leading the pack.
Yeah, well, they're not feminists, and they're really not feminists. I mean, we can have this discussion forever about whether Margaret Thatcher was a feminist, whether Beyoncé is a feminist, whether Katie Price is a feminist. There may be strong women, there may be vocal, they may have a vagina, or they may not, but they are not feminists. Every other social, political movement has a basis, has a set of principles and beliefs. Right, the working class movement does, the anti-racist movement does, and feminism does. And it is the one social political movement that everybody seems to think they can rewrite and own. And actually it is about overthrowing the oppression that women face from patriarchy, from men, from male supremacy, whatever way you want to say it. These dickheads, these keyboard warriors, these identifarians are not feminists. They are whinging narcissists. And they think that they can identify as feminists because actually we are quite a nice movement. We tend not to chuck the nutters out, right? We tend to embrace them. This is the problem with some of the left. And I'm firmly on the left. And if you're not on the left, then you can't be a feminist as far as I'm concerned. So you can fuck off. But when I think that it was feminism that went through this in the early 80s. For example, I was homeless when I moved to London, and I had a look in a window and saw that there was a room available in a co-op house in a squat for a Jewish, lesbian, feminist, vegetarian. Now, I've got Jewish heritage, so that bit was fine. I'm a lesbian, obviously, and I'm a feminist. I say obviously because no man would have me, which, right? But I wasn't a vegetarian, and nor am I still. And I got chucked out because they found a chicken carcass in the bin. So my friend had been round, right? But I used to go round to the Irish house next door, which was the Irish lesbian feminist house, because they always used to come back on the boat from Dublin, and they had whiskey. But at the time, what was going on was, I was chucked out with the chicken carcass because I wasn't an authentic vegetarian, and the woman in the Irish house was found to not have any Irish heritage at all, and she was chucked out. So what used to happen then is that we would lie just to get into a meeting, right? There was this thing that was called it was fat identity politics, right? So it was like fat liberation, and literally I used to say, do you have a pair of scales at the door of this conference so that if you're thin you had to pay more? It was ridiculous, but at least there was authenticity. It was ridiculous, it was mad, but at least there was a sense of political negotiating where you would recognise that somebody black might suffer structural oppression compared to a white person. Now, as I say, it's the white man with the beard identifying his arse as black or as female. This to me is the problem, but identity politics per se have become so ridiculous that, as you said, they're beyond parody and we need to sort it out. Yeah, I mean, obviously, being a lesbian, I am almost a man anyway. But I do actually have to disagree with Joe about the latest fuckwittery being the fault of proper feminists. The personal is political was a very important concept to bring women's experiences out of the private sphere, where we were absolutely, contained, into the public sphere, where women who were individually being beaten by individual men, or had been sexually abused by individual fathers or stepfathers, or who had suffered men's violence because they were girls and women, never talked to each other. They always thought they were the only one. So therefore, consciousness-raising groups, which came out of the personal is political, explored the fact that this was a sex class oppression, that there is a structure called patriarchy, and this is an oppressive regime that, if you roll your eyes any further, they'll probably end up in that ceiling. Anyway, that women as a class suffer oppression from men as a class. So it was really, really important. And then the identitarians took hold of it. The postmodernists, the Judith Butlerites, decided that there was no material reality in being female anymore. And I'm anti-biological determinist, by the way. I believe that social construction is what makes us what we are. So the Butlerites, the postmodernists, they were the ones that messed around with the personal is political and made it anything that you choose to be. And so now what that means is that you can just decide any identity you like. It helps if you're a man to start with. Incidentally, that debate where Brendan and co were no platformed for being men, they were deeply transphobic. They should have said womb bearers rather than women, because you're now not allowed to talk about having a vagina or a womb or anything that actually does materially really affect women in this society. It's womb bearers, because trans men, of course, can get pregnant. So it's about who can own the actual label. And trust me, there is not a right for me as a white woman, and nor should there be, to all of a sudden start hectoring at black people who've experienced racism and identify as black. I would be kicked out of that room. But isn't it funny how Bruce Jenner and how, what's your fella who was the boxing promoter, Frank Maloney, they can just say they're women. It's a feeling now. It's nothing to do with any material reality at all. I would love to see an end to the label woman, female. I'd love to see an end to gender. I don't feel like a woman. I've no idea what that means. But I'm told constantly by men that they know what it feels like to be a woman.
If you espouse the kind of social constructionist viewpoint, are you not opening the door to the idea of the malleability of identity, that you can chop and change and choose what your identity is?
Well, it depends. If you think that gender is innate, then you can argue that you're really, you've got a female brain. You go to this brain sex nonsense back from the 1950s. If you think that gender, as I do, is a social construct, totally a social construct, then what are you swapping and changing? I mean, I'm a gender abolitionist. I'm not a gender defender. You're just leaping from one set of socially constructed stereotypes to another. And, wearing a tutu and Dr. Martin boots and a shaved head and tattoos, you can think you're all queer and trendy. But actually all you're doing is you're taking what's already been constructed as stereotype feminine characteristics, stereotype masculine characteristics, and putting them together.
Yeah, a lot of this seems to play on stereotypes. I mean, for instance, the NUS Women's Conference, which was very recent, where they passed a motion saying we are prohibiting gay white men from appropriating black female culture, which is predicated on the idea that there are certain gestures, mannerisms and language that only black women should have. It should be the exclusive domain of them, and that it shouldn't be the case that other people can approach. And to me, that is peddling in stereotypes as much as anything else, I think.
Yeah. But they are deeply biologically determinist, all of them.
Right.
They are based on the premise of a lady brain. And of course, a penis on a trans woman is a lady stick. I quote. I haven't seen one for a very long time, but I doubt if it looks that different. I've always hated identity politics. The last time round, when we were actually at least doing politics, we were out there with placards and banners and making changes, structural changes, challenging things that we needed to change. It went so far with speaking as a blah, 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 that we ended up with this joke, speaking as a headless woman. I find that really offensive. I don't see that we're that far away from that, to be honest, now. I mean, seriously, I doubt if most people would laugh if you said that on Twitter now, speaking as a headless woman. There'd be a new category for you, right? Easily. I think that it is, the reason why it's gone so berserk is because of a lack of political organising amongst the working classes, and that's within feminism and out of feminism. And I would argue that was destroyed under Thatcherism, and many of you might disagree with that, some of you might agree. And so now what it is, it's, in terms of feminism, those that call themselves feminists that do this, that are not, they're extremely, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to bring an identity in here. They are extremely privileged, upper middle class born, namby-pamby pampered little twats. And that is why they feel so entitled all the time to decide what they are, because they own the debate, which is why so many men who transition to female think that they can tell me and other women to shut the fuck up because they know better. So it's being used in the most pernicious anti-political way. And I do think a lot of it's to do with class, because when I was doing feminism, when it was, you know, back in the 80s, battling through the identity politics, we still achieved masses of stuff. But we understood it was actually the class that you fight for rather than the class that you were born into that matters. And we saw the changes that came about. Now, what they're doing is that these women, these young men and women, have decided that this is all about their individual rights, not a collective movement. And so their individual right is not to be hurt, not to be offended, and to decide what they are, even if it's a million miles away from what they actually are.
Okay, yeah. Julie.
Well, I think that the two speakers who spoke about identity politics being real to some degrees to disadvantaged or oppressed groups, I would call it political activism. And I would say that it's, as a lesbian, you know, I have been beaten up and sexually assaulted because I'm a lesbian. So you can't deny also that as a woman, you know, I'm paid less sometimes for the same job as a man, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, of course, I absolutely accept that point. But identity politics is something different, I think. It's about the I am, therefore I am. And it is self-serving narcissism, but political activism to end oppression of particular groups is totally necessary. But I think there's one really important thing about the no platforming student nonsense at the moment, which is that they are terrified of hearing anything that they might disagree with, and that's a broad cultural reality. And this worries me far more than idiots standing up with a beard and white skin saying that they're black female. They absolutely refuse to be offended in any way. They, for example, one of the colleges in the US has insisted on putting a trigger warning and a content note on Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart in case it upset them about colonialism and racism. They refuse to look at rape law in case it triggers them about their experiences of sexual assault. What an utter disgrace. The last no platforming I experienced, which is all based on an article I wrote in 2004, was ridiculous in the sense that I was no platform for a debate on whether feminism was being censored, and I was debating Milo Yiannopoulos, who is a very proud anti-feminist. They no platformed me for transphobia, whorephobia, Islamophobia, and as it says in the NUS student document when they no platform me, Julie Bindel is vile. Mm-hmm. So they no platform me, but Milo, the anti-feminist, who's written far worse than I have on the transgender issue, was welcome. So it's just a handy tool to shut down the voices that they just don't like.
Thank you. Anything you want?
I'd like to see a return to political activism rather than this split-hair nonsense, the Alice through the looking glass type of feminism. It's utterly ridiculous. I do have to point out, though, to the person that called me a hypocrite, my faults are legion, but hypocrisy is not one of them, which is why I'm constantly in trouble. I don't want to tell anyone to shut the fuck up. I want them to stop telling me to shut the fuck up based on absolutely nothing. And I really look forward to people being braver about this, rather than walk around like you're in a combination of The Life of Brian, 1984, and Alice Through the Looking Glass, where you actually are literally being forced to believe and say you believe that black is white, that the sea is the sky. You know, let's be braver. Let's challenge these things. We know it's nonsense. We know it's ridiculous. And we really have to stop being such cowards about it.